today's video, we're going to investigate a very curious case, which is known as one of the most important events for ufology worldwide, due to the number of witnesses who experienced this case. The case, that so happens to involve Brazil, is the case of the night when 21 UFOs allegedly invaded Brazilian airspace and were pursued by FAB fighter jets. So tag along, because I'm Tiago Tadeo, and welcome to the Upside Down. The controller had just arrived at work that night on May 19th, 1986. He worked at Professor Urbano Ernesto Stumpf International Airport, which is located in São José dos Campos in the state of Sao Paulo. That was supposed to be just another ordinary night, with nothing really interesting going on, but the controller had no idea that he was about to enter the world history of ufology, with what would become known as the Night of the UFOs. It began all of a sudden. He had just sat at his desk, coming in as a substitute for his colleague from the previous shift. He straightened up his chair and waited for the next scheduled aircraft to contact, which would happen in about 20 minutes. The controller even thought about pouring himself a coffee at that time, but it was interrupted by a call from another tower in Minas Gerais, saying that they had seen strange things in the sky. As soon as he hung up, he received a new call, this time from local authorities saying that civilians were contacting them, reporting sightings of strange flying objects. It was at that moment that he realized that something was happening, and taken by curiosity, he recorded each of the contacts and later published news, which allowed him to know that in total 21 unidentified flying objects were sighted by civilians and military in several Brazilian states that same night, practically at the same time in fact. According to some witnesses, some of these UFOs even measured more than 100 meters in diameter, so we're talking about something frighteningly big. Only in the interior of the state of Sao Paulo, they were registered in the cities of Cacapaava, Taubaté, and Mogi das Cruzes. However, with the data collected by the controller, he identified that these three sightings were from the same group of UFOs. Therefore, cross-referencing information from all states, he came up with the number of 21 unidentified flying objects that were witnessed by thousands of people that night. But guys, what made the case take global media by storm was that among the witnesses there were about 2,000 military personnel, including cadets and officers from the Special Aeronautical School, who witnessed the phenomenon both through the naked eye and with binoculars. That's right, the Army itself is proof that this event really happened. And guys, this story doesn't stop there. You will be surprised. Well, let's pin a point to contextualize this story and help you. Now, this is going to get interesting, because those 2,000 military personnel I mentioned earlier weren't even the top members of the army who became eyewitnesses to this strange event. Yeah, this case is about to get pretty bizarre. And if you don't believe in UFOs, well, who knows? You might change your mind from now on. Well, at the same time the controller was receiving the calls at the airport, the Integrated Center for Air Defense and Air Traffic Control, or as it's known in Brazil, CAPTURED, ended up noticing the event happening too. Yeah guys, the command center responsible for identifying if Brazilian airspace was being invaded by a foreign force ended up identifying the UFOs that same night there as invaders. All the 21 aircrafts were noticed by sensors and radar. That is, we're not just talking about objects of light that were seen by civilians. Here the case is very different. On that UFO night, we literally had the agency responsible for identifying airstrikes identifying these cases. They were solid and real, but it didn't stop there. Let me tell you, this is an intense story. Have you got any popcorn there? Because I think you're going to need it. Seeing as CAPTURED had no idea that those intruders on their radar were apart from UFOs, they began to treat the threat like any other. 5 Brazilian Air Force fighter planes were activated by the Air Defense Operations Center, with the aim of intercepting the alleged invaders. The entire chase was recorded by the Air Force, which claims it was one of the strangest experiences their team has witnessed in their entire career, if not the organization's history. Those who witnessed the moment say the pilots looked very distressed during the chase, because they couldn't deal with the idea of what they were actually facing. According to these witnesses, there were moments when the pilots locked eyes on their targets, which then simply disappeared in moments, an impossible maneuver to be performed. Whenever they had the impression that they were about to catch up with them, something absurd would happen and they would disappear again. It was as if they were trying to catch a Boeing using a bicycle to get around. One of the most important witnesses of the event itself was Sergeant Sergio Mogi da Silva, who was piloting Flight 703 of the extinct Rio Sol airline, which was bound for Rio de Janeiro. However, in the middle of the way, he identified a strange light that definitely shouldn't be there. Immediately, he contacted the tower, where he would get in contact with the controller and start the entire investigation process of what happened that night. In his call, he asked if there were any aircraft heading to São José dos Campos Airport, to which the controller responded with a no. At that moment, Sergio was very confused, stating that both he and the co-pilots who accompanied him there were certain that at that exact moment, they saw a light similar to a lighthouse standing still in the sky, which probably indicates that they were moving at the same speed as them, however, dangerously invading their airspace. However, what made it even weirder was that during the conversation, the object simply disappeared, turning the night pitch black. They were really confused by everything, thinking that they had seen some bizarre weather phenomenon. But before they could try to forget it, the lights came back on, and this process repeated itself a few times. Sergeant Sergio says that at a certain point in the trip, he thought about reducing the intensity of the lights on his aircraft, which, to his surprise, was answered with the approach of the flying objects. Curious to be able to observe them in more detail, he increased the luminosity, which made the UFOs move away completely. He did this a few times, and then he got the impression that they were acting in a patterned way. But at the time, he was tired and confused and scared, and couldn't think clearly about it. However, later in an interview, Sergio says that, thinking back, he has the impression that they could have been trying to communicate with him in some way, using movement and lights, but he had no way of understanding that at the moment. On a second thought, he thinks they behaved in a smart way, almost as if they were flying alongside another common aircraft. Despite sharing the same airspace, they kept a safe distance between them. However, guys, unfortunately, Sergio's plane was not the only one that saw the UFOs, and not everyone had the opportunity to have a pleasant moment with them. In fact, several other aircraft spotted the event, such as a Bandeirante model from TAM that was traveling to Sao Paulo, and another from Trans Brazil also sent signals to local towers reporting UFOs. Yeah, when I said that this case had become a phenomenon in the history of ufology because of this amount of witnesses, I wasn't kidding. But guys, on a lot of these other planes, passengers ended up seeing the lights too. And I don't know about you, but I think if I saw something like that while on a plane, I'd probably panic. I don't know if I've seen too many movies in my life where UFOs come taking planes down, invading the crew, and that leaves a kind of uncomfortable track history for us in case we see something strange in the sky, right? In any case, I sympathize with those people who panicked when they saw the event. I imagine anyone would be scared at a time like that, right? You can imagine, the next morning there wasn't talk of anything else. To give you an idea, the president of the Brazilian multinational corporation in the petroleum industry, Petrobras, at the time went to hold a press conference to talk about the company, but all the journalism ever asked about was the UFOs case the night before. After the second question, he got angry and even gave up on the interview, saying he didn't want to comment on the case, but that would be inevitable, because I imagine that throughout the week he only heard about it, since this would be recognized as a UFO event with the largest number of witnesses in human history. Despite the hunt made by FAB, in general, the ufologists determined that, in the end, it would be wrong to consider what happened on the night of May 19th, 1986 as an invasion. That's because despite all the roar and fright caused by the arrival of the UFOs there, they didn't show any sign of hostility at the time. Quite the contrary, since they probably would have even disappeared if they hadn't been witnessed by so many people. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's a visit, or it should have been a visit that took place in the Middle Ages. Humanity wouldn't even have the technology to notice back then, so maybe they didn't know we had technology at the time and ended up coming again. This is just my theory. Well, what guarantees us that this visit in the past did not actually happen? Nothing, huh? So we can say that it was more a UFO tour than an actual invasion. A little stop to see how Brazil was doing maybe. Out of everything that has happened in the case so far, there's still one detail that I have neglected to mention, because it is without a doubt the strangest of all. That's because journalist-photographer Adenir Britto was in his office around 9 p.m. that night when he received a call saying that there were UFOs in the sky. He thought it was a prank call, of course, but just looking out the window, he saw the lights and ran off to take pictures. Adenir says he spent the night doing this, shooting more than 6,000 photos. But what's really strange about this is that before he could develop the photos that were still on the film reel at that time, he was contacted by a person from the Aerospace Technical Center who was communicating as a mediator for the American analyst at NASA, known as James J. Hurtak. At the time, imagining that this could bring him notoriety, he gave them photos without thinking twice. But more than 30 years later, he has never heard from the researcher who, according to NASA itself, does not exist, since this is the name of another researcher who has nothing to do with them. On second thought after this revelation, Adenir was confused about the man who pretended to be Hurtak would have known that he had taken the photographs, and how well he would impersonate the researcher to be able to deceive a Brazilian agency and steal the photos like this. Well, that made Adenir imagine that there are even more strange things and mysterious organizations trying to hide information about this event that was witnessed by thousands of Brazilians. Well, have you ever heard about this amazing night where 21 UFOs appeared to many people? If you know someone who saw or experienced this or any other related story that day, leave it down here in the comments, okay? This video will be ending here, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. A hug and see you next one. Thanks.